With each generation and also with each demographic and also geographic group as well, there is a different consumer behavior and purchase behavior. And for different groups, there are certain kind of triggers or points that will make you purchase an item, whether it's an impulse or mix or luxury or semi-luxury or affordable or basic. There's specific categories of products or clothing that you buy, and the percentage changes based on what demographic and what geographic you're in. One of the biggest reasons that sustainability is more associated with younger people is also sustainable fashion didn't become a mainstream thing or topic until I would say like 2015, 2017.
Could you just share with me more, like what inspired you to create Bubblehaus, have that fusion and that merging of culture?
The reason that I wanted to start Bobblehaus was for that exact reason. So I graduated college with a business degree in 2017 from Washington University in St. Louis. And I moved to New York City to become a system buyer at Bloomingdale's. And it was my senior year in college that I decided that I want to be in the fashion industry. And when I first stepped my toe in the industry, it was actually in PR and advertising. So that was from my internship that was my junior year internship in London when I worked for London Fashion Week. So I was part of the PR intern for Mulberry, which is a luxury leather good brand. I was kind of like got thrown into it because it was the first fashion experience that I've ever had in my entire life. I never took any fashion classes before. I never took any like design classes before. I took retail management class one time and that was about it. So when I saw it, it was so glamorous. I felt like, like that typical girl, like living every like 16-year-old girl's dream, right? But the thing is, I also saw kind of like the more ugly side of fashion. The toxic mentality behind, some of the whole atmosphere of the industry. Like, I don't want to go too much into the detail, but I definitely see there is a need for change. Understood. So when I joined Bloomingdale, I was all geared up. I was like, okay, like this is the time for me to prove myself. I want to be fashionable, but at the same time, I want to be sustainable. And at that time in 2017, the only option seems to be like Reformation. Depop wasn't really around. Retail market wasn't as big. ThredUp wasn't how it is right now. So there wasn't that much choices around, and Instagram Shop was not a thing either. So when I joined Bloomingdale, I thought that opportunity finally came. So every single day I will go in and I will pitch to my buyer other sustainable brand that I found. There was a whole 2017 was at the time there was a lot of sustainable Australian brands that were merging, especially in swimwear. That was really big then. But being like associate level, I couldn't really contribute to much change. And I completely understand where they're coming from. It's a very big company. It's a multi-billion, company, and they're public. So I saw kind of the bottleneck of the changes that I can make, even if I stay in the company for 5-10 years. And maybe one day I was lucky enough to become a buyer there, right? So because of that, I decided that, you know what, I am going to do something of my own. I quit my job on April 12th, 2019. And then on that Sunday, I flew straight to Shanghai for sourcing. And for sourcing fabric, for sourcing manufacturer. Before that, I have talked to like about 20, 30 manufacturers, and I have scheduled meeting with them. And now I went to 5 different cities around Shanghai, and I also flew to Taiwan for sourcing manufacturers and fabric, because Taiwan was really big on sustainable fabric production. But at that time, the demand or the supply wasn't catching up on the demand. It was like Everlane was like hitting its peak. Reformation was getting super, super big, but I'm like blanking on what else was going on. Allbirds was starting, like Allbirds was happening at that time. But when I go to my manufacturers, and the biggest question they will ask is that, why do you want recycled cotton? It's more expensive. It's not as high quality. It's really, really hard and rough compared to organic or origin cotton. Origin cotton means like you used it the first time. Everyone just kind of asked me like why, but I was very adamant on it because I truly believe our generation. So I was born in '95, so I can be considered either a millennial or a Gen Z depending on which report you read. So I kind of see myself a little bit of both depending on what situation. But one of the things that I really hold to myself is I want to leave the planet better than I landed in it. So that was one of the biggest things that I did not compromise on. So the manufacturer that we end up choosing has certified GRS recycled cotton that we use. But for quality purposes, we use 50% recycled cotton and 50% organic cotton, first use organic cotton. And then the other biggest fabric that I've done a lot of research on then that we use is certified tencel, which is made out of wood, which is much, much more eco-friendly. I don't want to say sustainable, but much, much more eco-friendly compared to a lot of other materials in the world. And we source a lot of dead stock, meaning that we don't produce any custom color. We don't really produce any custom print. We do a lot of like wide sourcing on what fabric that our manufacturers or our agent currently have on hand that are maybe like leftover from other fashion brands or other production companies, or even like from furniture or interior design industries and stuff like that. And we source those, and we use what factory that we take into a fabric that we have, and we actually design from there. And that's also why that we don't follow, we see a lot of changes that need to be made in the fashion industry. And, you know, starting with, I think the past couple of years, there are huge rise to D2C fashion brands, and we don't want to follow the traditional wholesale. We don't want to follow seasonality. The new generation, we buy things however we see it, right? Like we see it on Instagram and then we buy it instantly, or like we see it online and we buy it instantly. Doesn't matter if it's supposedly for winter or supposedly for spring, summer, or anything like that. So I want to make those changes, and thus I created Bubblehaus. Yeah.
You know how like Bobblehaus, there's this sense of like absurdity and like embracing your inner self, you know, and I just wanted to ask, like, what is that all about? Like, how did you, you know, decide that you would also involve that theme of absurdity inside?
Yeah. So for sure. So the model is, or I guess not model, but the brand vibe, how we categorize it is what we call classify absurdity. Classify meaning the parts that are hidden or withheld from general public, maybe because we're self-conscious, maybe because we're trying to fit in, or anything, for any reason, right? And absurdity, I mean, that's kind of like self-explanatory. But that part is because we want to encourage others to showcase the rather weird or abnormal parts of yourself to public viewing. Be confident with who you are, be comfortable with who you are. It doesn't matter how weird or how absurd that someone might call it. And that's why we call it classified absurdity. The whole, you know, our journal, our graphics, our social media, our presence, our design, everything that we create surrounds that classify absurdity idea. Yeah.
the way that you explained it was really highlighting how there are some parts that people want to keep in the shadows, and then later on they just bring it out, and it could manifest in either writing, in either graphics, in animation, stuff like that, all of which is like amazingly encapsulated on Bubblehaus. Like the website looks amazing. So actually, you know what? Like I really wanted to ask. I've been dying to ask. Like I think Andrew, right? He did the website. How did y'all come up with like the clouds, with the idea of that? It's just so amazing. But it's not absurd per se. Like to me, when I see it, it seems more like an endlessness or limitless. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
like, how did all the design aspects come in?
Yeah, so we wanted to do something different. How do we really convey our own absurdity? That was the biggest question that we asked ourselves. And trust me, there were like hour-long brainstorm sessions, like weeks after weeks, where we pivot from one direction to other. But that's the fun and exciting part of being a startup, is that we have the privilege to pivot. We have also the privilege to like test a lot of things out. And for the website, we wanted to do something different from other fashion website that we have seen. We don't have a lot of money to create like a super intricate website. So we thought about like, okay, so what makes us happy, but also kind of create this very different but inclusive and open atmosphere, as soon as whoever comes to our website can instantly feel. I think it was one of those days that we were having a meeting, and it was in a wing, which is a co-working space in the city. And it was after like a 4-6 hour long meeting, and we were so tired. And then we were like, okay, you know what? We're gonna go for a bubble tea run. Like we're gonna time out. We're gonna go for like bubble tea or bubble guys like across the street. Like we can't do this. And then we step outside. The sun was shining. The sky was blue. We're like, huh. Maybe there's something
Wow,
here.
that's amazing.
Yeah, and then we tried a few things, because originally we wanted to do a reflective surface, kind of like a mirror, but where a little bit aluminum vibe, but then it was rather hard to read, and it felt like too metally, and then we tried a few other things. We tried a rainbow gradient. We tried kind of like an orange yellow gradient. A lot of things, like it's very fascinating. That was actually not our first choice, but it was something that our whole team agreed that it conveys our attitude the best.
Just now you were talking about being a startup and stuff, and I just like, I mean, because I understand that you went to school for business, and you had those internships with like real life experience and stuff, and you shared about how that played a role in your journey so far. So I just wanted to know, like, do you have any advice for younger entrepreneurs? Just they have a vision, and let's say like they didn't go into entrepreneurship, or they didn't go into an internship thinking that they would come out of it with such meaningful value, like what you did. Yeah. So do you have any advice for them, for young entrepreneurs, essentially?
Yeah, I think the biggest, or like the the best advice that I can offer, because it's only been I mean I hope I'll be a successful entrepreneur one day, but the best advice I can offer for a new entrepreneur, as a new entrepreneur right now, is talk to as many people as possible, and just chat. Like you don't have to go find someone for the sole purpose of mentorship or for advice or anything. But if you have an idea, talk to your friends, talk to your colleague, talk to your teachers, talk to people in your community, or honestly anyone, because the more feedback you get, the more solid that idea will become in your head, and just go for it. Life is short. It really
No,
is.
that's amazing advice. That's good advice. Yeah.
Someone once told me is that right now it's the best time to do it because I have no real responsibility. I don't have a family. I don't have, a lot of debt on my shoulder. I don't own a home yet. I rent this studio apartment in New York City. So honestly, this is, this is really the best time. I think the other advice I can give, is just to go for it. And the best you can do is dream on and don't give up. As cliche and corny as it sounds, but it really, really is. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I especially like what you talked about how you don't go out to like with the mission of like networking with a motive, but it's more just to really understand other people's views in that industry. I think that's what helps a lot of successful people grow. But because nowadays it's always like, oh, I have to learn this soft skill or that soft skill, but we don't appreciate the authenticity of a conversation and just that genuine advice. And you highlighted that today. So girl, thank you. Yeah. Actually, like right before you came, like we were gonna do the question on how do you guys meet. So how do you guys meet? Our favorite co-founders.
Go ahead, Abby.
Yeah. So my roommate, who is a mutual friend of both of ours, actually introduced us. I was working corporate fashion for a couple of years, and she knew that wasn't really suiting me, and I wasn't fully being used my potential, all of these things, just a corporate environment. And she knew Ophelia, and knew Ophelia was starting her own company, and at that point it wasn't quite Bobblehaus yet. It still had a different name. It was at the very beginning stages. So she introduced us like, hey, you need a designer, you're a designer, I think your like aesthetics would fit, I think that your mindset fits. And then it was like a year brewing of I knew she was starting this, but I wasn't fully on board yet. And then when I was finally ready to quit corporate, I did about 2 months ago and fully came on board, which was scary and awesome and probably one of the best decisions I've made. So
amazing.
Yeah. I'll say this every single time. I planted that seed a year ahead.
I know, she was smart. I was like, I was not in the place at that time, right? And then she probably knew. She's like, she's gonna come back to me at some point.
Gonna come in.
I'm gonna say I got really, really lucky. When I met Abby, I was very open and transparent and honest about it. I said, if you ever, when I saw her design and everything, and I know her work from her previous corporates, and I told her from the first month that I met her, I think I was like, if you ever want to quit your job and become a full-time designer or head of a design of a brand, the spot is always open.
Oh, actually, like I think the genderless part is something that I really wanted to ask about. How was the thought process behind that? And like, were you inspired by any like sort of brand or designer or even item of clothing in particular that really saw you branching into designing clothes that are genderless?
I mean, I can speak to just now being on, and like I think that I actually like my personal style is quite genderless. Like I like wearing men's stuff and I like wearing baggier stuff, and I honestly just like wearing whatever I like. It's not to say I don't like wearing like sexy dresses sometimes too, but it's just like any clothes that you see out there that you like, you should be allowed to wear, and however you want to wear it. And so if we can have an offering where it's not restricting to anyone, right? Because gendered clothing is essentially, of course, it's catered to some people, but it's also restricting to others. So if everything we offer is actually can be for anyone, I think that's our goal.
Yeah. I think from my end, and I can speak to more business side of things too in a bit, but to start is that we have our own personal bias in it for sure, because 20-30% of everything in my closet is technically considered menswear, like men's polo, men's shirts, or men's blazer. Like it was considered in fashionista.com or vogue.com in like every season that all girl needs to have a men's blazer in their closet. In the merchandising world, it was like lesson 101 or something like that. And it was also it was something, I had a very cute little purpose that I really want with genderless clothing is I wanted to be a shared closet between couples. Doesn't matter girl, girl, guy, guy, girl, guy, or trans, or whoever you are, but I wanted to be a
Like a
closet.
share.
Yeah, or like an outfit where you can share with your significant other, your SO.
So good. That's so cute. Like literally. Yeah. Wow.
I don't know why. I think when I first designed it, I thought, oh, it would be so cute because it was always considered, I guess, like sexy for a girl to wear a guy's shirt, right? But now more and more, it's also considered really attractive to women when we see a guy be fully confident and comfortable in more feminine apparels. I don't want to say specific like dresses or a blouse or pants or whatever, but just like overall more feminine apparels, like, you know, the rise with BTS, the rise of K-pop, like NCT 127, just EXO, just name a few, right? But also Timothy Chalamet, Harry Styles, Jackson Wang, Pharrell, like they were all advocates of redefining toxic masculinity. And that was a really, really big thing for me personally. Exactly. That's not really defined by the gender of the person who wears it or, you know, the person who bought it or the person it's designed for, but rather it can be fitted for a whole spectrum of people.
You know, like when you run something that's sustainable fashion, I think Ophelia mentioned in the beginning of this talk that really it's expensive to source for recycled stuff, to source for things that have been like, you know, like they have been ethically produced, they have been, you know, they've gone through a process which makes it less toxic to the environment. So like, you know, just, yeah, could you share with us, is it true that it's a lot more expensive, and, you know, which specific parts of the whole process were something that a lot more financially heavy as opposed to if you just chose like a mainstream sort of fabric or something?
Well, depending on which type of organic cotton, so I can't exactly say that, but origin cotton, like the first time, the non-certified or like the first use of type of cotton.
And overall, like in very, very general sense, it is more expensive to do the sustainable method, from choosing fabrics down to the factories that have more sustainable practices, and to every step of the way, which is why a lot of fashion brands shy away from that, or it's not their priority. So that's the thing. And what we're trying to do, I think, which is differentiating, say, than like an Everlane, which is a semi-affordable, right, pretty large production, sustainable model, is that we're smaller production than that, for one, and two, we have more design, right? So where we see that there's kind of a lack in the fashion market is highly designed, colorful, really fun, like attainable and aspirational streetwear, but that is sustainable. Because usually a lot of when you think of sustainable brands, they're a little bit bland, they're a little bit oatmeal. So it's like, where can we elevate sustainability? And I think that is really just what we're beginning in the fashion world, like, to see right now. So I think it's a trend that's going to keep increasing. Yeah.
And one thing that I want to add to that that Abby mentioned before that is really important is the word sustainable is tricky, because in the fashion world, or if you talk to any so-called sustainable brand owner, they will say, and they will agree, that there's not 100% sustainable brand unless you are negative carbon emission, negative footprint. You don't, to a point that you are using trash and producing something, but it's not possible yet when we talk about 100% sustainability. All we can do is to lead a movement where we inspire and encourage a very eco-conscious core and purchase behavior, and very eco-friendly minded, the idea behind fashion, behind styling, behind merchandising, and behind what you wear. And one of the most important things during the startup process was actually finding a manufacturer who's willing to do the low minimum that we were trying to hit. And I can tell you this, out of 10, 20 people that I talked to, only one person, which is our manufacturer right now, said yes to us. And he saw our vision. He saw what we're trying to do. He, he is our partner rather than just our manufacturer. And he is a very, very small, family run, privately owned, been in the business for 40, 60 years himself, with his family in Shanghai, kind of like a small production room. Yeah. And that's who we decided to, we were going to keep going until we find someone like him. And then we were very lucky that we do.
It's something that is kind of like a widely known, not really widely known, but something that a lot of people hold. And it's that sustainable fashion brands are mainly for younger people, and that doesn't vibe with the older generation. So like, when you guys were doing like market segmentation, like really looking at consumer base and stuff, like what do you think of that?
The answer to that question is that with each generation and also with each demographic, and also geographic group as well, there is a different consumer behavior and purchase behavior. And for different groups, there are certain kind of triggers or points that will make you purchase an item, whether it's an impulse or mix or luxury or semi-luxury or affordable or basic. There's specific categories of products or clothing that you buy. And the percentage changes based on what demographic and what geographic you're in. And I think that one of the biggest reasons that sustainability is more associated with younger people is also sustainable fashion didn't become a mainstream thing or topic until I would say like 2015, 2017. And Abby, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, within the last decade for sure. So it's like older generations it's not even really on their mind. And like, yeah.
For sure. And I think that with for older generation, for example, baby boomer and as well as older millennials, they come from a different perspective when they purchase an item. But for us, a lot of time that we purchase, we're more conscious. I guess the reasoning is as simple as we're going to live on this earth the longest. So we better be careful with what we purchase, how we consume, and how we throw things away, right?
Especially these young people who have kind of like the power to decide and pave the way now.
Yeah. And more than a choice, like I feel like it's a responsibility for our generation too, is because Ophelia right. I mean, we're trying to create a world that we want our children to live in. So it is really a responsibility that it's like, okay, well, let's try to do everything we can now and do the best that we can.